Hello, Catherine Foley is my name, and I'm going to read today from my book Beyond the Breakwater. And today I'm going to read two chapters because they're both set in Dublin. Chapter 44, The Two Germans. They were both very tall and very handsome. In fact, they looked as if they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. One was called Christian and the other Heinrich. They were university students in Germany, soft-spoken and gentlemanly. They explained that they were from Bavaria, and I remember asking them if they were able to ski. Oh yes, they gushed. They skied every winter. My friend Maura introduced me to them. We were all there together in Edinburgh. I had just finished a course in journalism in Dublin, and I was on holidays visiting Maura, who was working at the university. They may as well have stepped out of the pages of a Mills and Boon story. These men were so like film stars that I hardly spoke to them for the duration of my stay. Saying that, they were friendly and open. I learned that they would be conscripted into the Navy on their return to Germany, and that they'd have to complete a term of compulsory service as commissioned officers. They didn't like the idea at all. It hung over them like a prison sentence. I listened with a sort of glazed look on my face as they spoke about this upcoming conscription. When I returned home to Dublin, I forgot all about the two men who had so dazzled me for all of 5 days, and my romantic imagination soon righted itself, especially as I knew I would never see them again, or so I thought. I soon got a job as a young freelance reporter for Enish, an Irish language newspaper, and I spent the months of September and October skipping from one event to another, learning the job. Then one day I waltzed back into the Enish offices in Merrion Square, and the friendly sub-editor handed me a telephone number and told me I had missed a telephone call and that I was to contact the German submarine in the port. It was moored alongside a Southside quay, he said in Irish, a wide grin on his face. I was confused, certain that something had been lost in translation, and I berated myself at the paucity of my Irish vocabulary. A submarine. As I picked up the phone, the small newsroom crew smiled at my confusion, and they waited to hear what would happen next. I listened to the dialling tone. When my call was picked up, I heard the telltale sounds of disembodied voices and a whooshing sort of interference on the line. The penny dropped when I heard a voice relay my message over a tannoy, and I remembered Heinrich and Christian just in time, seconds before one of them came on the line. "Hello, this is Christian," he said. He told me they were on the submarine, would sure leave that evening, and that they would love to meet me. I felt my cheeks go red from a mixture of shyness and anxiety, and I experienced a terrible urge to run away. But I could not be so rude, so I arranged to meet them on O'Connell Bridge at 6 p.m. I don't know why I suggested we meet on the central island of the bridge. In hindsight, I think it was blind panic that made me suggest this very public spot. I suppose part of me worried that they might get lost or that I'd miss them. I need not have worried. There they stood later that evening on the central island of O'Connell Street, the two tall Germans in full naval dress. Not a gold button or a white braided cord was missing. Every tassel and insignia imaginable was present on some part of their persons, from their peaked caps to their double-breasted jackets. They fairly took the wind out of my sails. I sidled up to them, knowing how inappropriate my Jesus sandals and casual clothes were. I felt the incongruity of our worlds keenly, while they, in contrast, were only happy to see me. They hugged me, towering over me, still stark and stiff in their uniforms, but desperately wanting to relax and feel the fresh, liffey air on their faces. And so we set off into the night. I wish I'd been a more gracious host, but I fairly raced them along until we were in off the street and settled in an anonymous bar in a nameless hotel where no one would see us. I kept watch the whole time in case someone who might know me happened along. What was I afraid of? That someone would think these two exotic creatures, naval officers from a German submarine, were paying for my company, or that they were observing me, studying me, like they would a creature in a zoo as part of some anthropological experiment. And so I kept them out of sight. I did not consider their loneliness or their need for some lively companionship to divert them from the constricted lives they had on board the submarine. Even as we chatted, I was completely taken up with planning how to be rid of them. After a few drinks, I looked at my watch as if I'd suddenly remembered something and told them I had to go. It was only 9 p.m. and not late at all when I stood on O'Connell Bridge to wave them off down the quays. As they walked off together, handsome, tall, their silhouettes in the glow of streetlights and the reflections from the river cast a spell on me, and I felt the loss of their company and friendship. But I let them go, and I knew for sure that night that I would never hear from or see them again. So then, chapter 45, also set in Dublin, and it's called Angela. The women outside my flat didn't intrude on my consciousness for a long while during the period when Miriam and I lived in a flat at the top of a tall Georgian building on Herbert Street in Dublin city centre. Miriam was nursing and I was working as a reporter for the newspaper The Sunday Tribune, and the two of us had been there for a few months before I realised what was going on down on the street. Snatches of their nighttime conversations used to travel up, disembodied and removed, snatches of rows, of obscenities, of breaking glass, of songs, doors banging, brakes screeching, tyres crunching, a woman in heels running or stumbling, and I'd hear their swear words. I'd hear them gathering down on the footpath on the wide doorstep outside our building. They were often right below my window, which was 4 stories up. They would sing The Fields of Athenry or I Did It My Way. I'd hear them cursing, and on occasion I'd listen to them when they sang together in a drunken delirium, singing snatches of songs, great belters and songs of desire, like Delilah. Why, they'd sing, growing in volume as the chord reached its zenith. They'd sing out emboldened and challenging until a bottle smashed or a car pulled up and one of them had to hobble off, shoes clip-clopping on the concrete. I used to have to smile at the self-awareness they seemed to imbue in those songs. They knew what they were doing, they knew what they were, where they were and what was happening in their lives. I used to wonder if I could help in some way, but I wasn't sure how I could. Sometimes it was only one woman who sat on the pavement, and it was only when someone else joined her that I'd hear the timid beginnings of a song, songs by Rod Stewart or Dolly Parton. I am sailing or working 9 to 5, like a virgin touched for the very first time. The irony was never lost on them. When they'd row, the venom and colour of their language shocked me at first. Mary, come back and sing with me. Fuck off, you cunt. And then their voices would disappear into the night. Their slurred words never let me forget that they were drinking, and all the time I'd hear the squeal of brakes. Heavy articulated lorries would pull up across the road, and for a while the singing would be suspended. I knew too from the quiet when a woman was leaning into a luxuriously upholstered car, and then I'd listen to the smoothly running engine as it revved up to leave. It was clear what was happening. During the day the street was light and airy. I'd return home in the late afternoon and see couriers and taxis drive up at irregular intervals, going from one office to the next, and couples strolling hand in hand. At night, however, the place emptied, and shadows flitting across the wide street and dark leafy trees would wave mysteriously from behind old-style Victorian railings. I'd lie in bed listening, intrigued and slightly horrified by the goings-on outside. But like any voyeur, I was attracted to the sounds and the stories they represented. It was late one night when I came upon one of the women sitting alone on the steps of our building. She was leaning against the railings that led up to the front door. She was drinking from a naggin of vodka. It was close to midnight and bitterly cold. It was easy to see her in the streetlights as I came along. Her short skirt was hitched up unevenly around her hips. The curve of her buttocks was visible at the top of fleshy thighs under a pair of torn black tights. She sported a little ponytail at the back of her head. She made to move out of my way as I approached. She curled into herself and tried to stand up. "Hello," I said, addressing her. She seemed to turn in closer to the railings. "Don't get up. You don't have to go," I said. It was freezing, but I was determined to reach out if I could. It was my chance. She muttered something. "It's very cold tonight," I said to her, nodding. I introduced myself. She looked at me warily for a moment, and I think with a hint of shame, until suddenly her face cracked open, and she smiled. Pointing to her chest, she said something. It was more of a rasping sound than a recognisable word. She repeated it again as if I was a half-wit. She said it patiently and with great slowness. "Ah!" Finally, I understood. It was her name. "Oh, Angela," I nodded. "Would you like to come up for a cup of tea? I live just in here. You must be frozen out here." "No, thanks, love. I'm all right. I have me bottle," she said. And then in a rush, once I've had enough so me daughter can get married, I'll be finished here." She looked away towards the corner of the street. In a spill of words, she poured her story out. "I have to make a bit of money. I've no choice, love. She got pregnant, so I had to come out. The father's only 15 and he's up before the courts in 2 months, so he's got no money. He won't be able to pay for the wedding." A car pulled up further down the footpath and she moved off the step. "I won't be doing this for much longer," she said. "If there's ever a night when you'd like a cup of tea, won't you ring my bell?" I told her. "Right, love, thanks," she said as she hurried towards the car. I put the key in the door and pushed it in. When I had climbed up the stairs up to our flat, I looked down and watched her on the footpath, leaning into in the window of the car and flicking a cigarette butt away. Although I often watched out for her, we soon moved to a different flat on a different street, and though we were still on the south side of the city, we were far away from any red light district, and so I never saw Angela again. So that's all for today. Thank you. Talk it tomorrow. Bye.